Well, Senate Estimates this week was absolutely sensational. Some great questioning from Matt Canavan, from Claire Chandler, and from Alex Antic. There was all sorts of stories put to the ABC and to the Human Rights Commission. It was great stuff. Here's Alex Antic to talk us through it. Alex, great to see you. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Rowan. How are you?
Yeah, we're very well, Senator. Just tell us firstly about the ABC, how you put to them accusations of their anti-Semitic reporting and, refusing to call Hamas a terrorist organisation. What was the response you got from the ABC?
Well, it won't surprise you to learn that it was a denial, but it was an interesting sort of day. I think when the ABC comes into Environment and Communications Committee, it's always interesting. But in this instance, there were a couple of key things, I think, that came from the coverage of the clashes in Israel. And I put it to the managing director that what we were getting through their outlets was a bias against Israel. We have these reports which continually make factual errors, errors about, simple historical matters, and but moreover, a coverage which to the sort of independent observer, I say, looks very much like it's coming from one side of the coin. For example, when it's reported, we often see the use of language being developed, such as referring to Hamas. We're always hearing them being referred to on the ABC as militants or militant organisations. Now, I put it to them that the Australian government's position quite clearly, the US government's position quite clearly, is that this is a prescribed terror organisation. And why is it that the ABC refuses to use that language? There's also this sort of editorial position which seems to be always referring to Israel as the aggressor and never seeming to cover off on the fact that Hamas, a terrorist organisation, are aiming rockets indiscriminately at civilian areas. So I said, look, what is the position here, and how is it that this can be read as anything other than an anti-Israel bias? That, of course, was rejected, and we move on, as is the way in Senate Estimates. But it is a very interesting little dynamic, and I think it's one that requires further digging around, or certainly put some of those questions on notice.
Absolutely. Rita?
Why can't we do something about this? Because I am so sick, I'm thoroughly sick of hearing government MPs, ministers, complain about the ABC, complain about the systematic bias there. You lot are in government. Do something about it. At what point are we going to actually do something rather than just complain to them and watch them dismiss those complaints?
Well, it's a great question, Rita. And in actual fact, I wrote something for the Menzies Research Centre not that long ago about this very topic. It seems almost like for the coalition backbencher like myself, there is 2 hours per year where you get an opportunity to sort of explore these issues, and then the ABC sort of retreats back to its corner and nothing changes. Well, I think you're quite right about that. We have had 3 terms to sort this out. And look, from where I sit, I think the starting point is a proper review of the ABC. We haven't really had a proper, and excuse me, I'm going to slap myself for using this language, deep dive into into the ABC since about 1983 with the Dix report. Now, that we've come a long way. That was the year of the America's Cup. In those days, the internet wasn't a thing. And so there have been others along the way, but I think we need to get back to that. And in addition to that, one of the questions I also put to the managing director was, what does he think about an ombudsman? Every other public body seems to have an ombudsman, the telecommunications ombudsman, a place where people can properly and accountably take their complaints and they get acted on. As a very simple measure, I think that's something that should be a no-brainer personally, because the complaint system seems to just roll through and nothing ever happens. I completely agree. But, you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different answers. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
James.
Senator, it's not just the ABC where the left has completed their long march through the institutions, of course. We also saw that the Australian Human Rights Commission came under some questioning. I don't know, do we have a grab of you talking to them about this?
No, but Alex, carry on.
Let me ask you, though. Tell me about what happened when you were talking to because I saw it, and just tell us, about what you found out about the attitude of these people to whether or not Australia is a systemically racist country.
Well, yeah, James, look, this comes back to something I think you wrote about during the week, which is this the reincarnation of the Racism It Stops With Me campaign, which is really a little bit like the bad guy in a horror movie where you think you've knocked him off and he comes back out of the swamp and he's still returning. We thought this had been dealt with in April, but it's come back to life, and the Human Rights Commission are now looking for tenders for work to be done on this issue of exploring whether or not Australia is structurally and institutionally racist. Now, from the language used there, you can only draw the conclusion that the HRC thinks there is an issue with structural and institutional racism in this country. And so I put that question to them, is it the case that the Human Rights Commission thinks Australia is? And if so, which institutions does the HRC say are structurally and institutionally racist? And look, I don't know. I mean, I couldn't quite make heads or tails, but it didn't seem to be an answer. It's extraordinary, really, this issue of trying to almost drum up the suggestion in the Australian psyche that, we're going to go out and we're going to use the AFL and tell people they are, when we know, you and I all know, that Australia is not a racist country. So I don't think we've got any answers on that. But once again, we'll put those on notice. We'll put them in writing and see what we can find out, because, to the casual observer, I think you would say the Human Rights Commission's telling me we've got a problem.
But Alex, this was a critical point, because what was really important is you kept asking the question. As I said, Matt Canavan, Claire Chandler also asked great questions, but you kept asking the point, please show us where the systemic and structural racism occurs. And the spokeswoman for the Human Rights Commission could not do that, and embarrassingly had to defer, played the cheapest card in the pack. She said, oh, well, I've got an Indigenous person here who'll tell you that she once suffered from some racism. Well, yeah, that's awful that she did. But as you pointed out, Alex, very clearly, that is not systemic. That is not institutional. That's one instance of someone doing a bad thing to another person. They could not point to a single area where there was a single institution in Australia that's racist. And you press that point home.
Well, that's right. Look, I think that is the ultimate arbiter of this is, where's the evidence? We're sort of seeing this language being bandied around, structural and institutionally racist. They use another one, I think, interpersonal racism. And frankly, I don't know what any of those terms mean, to be absolutely honest. But that's why we need evidence, So we put that to the people there and said, well, look, if we are talking about this, where is it? Where is the evidence of it? And you're quite right. We can all pick out individual instances of terrible things that happen to people, and it goes without saying we all deplore that. But that is a completely different thing to suggest that there is institutional racism in this country. Now, as it turns out, there were some Labor and Green senators around me that were throwing in their 2 cents about what was racist in this country. But, I don't know. I mean, the HRC couldn't seem to pin it down at that point. We'll put it on notice. We'll see if they can. I'd be interested to know which of the institutions in this country they think are racist.
Exactly. Rita.
Well, the Australian Human Rights Commission was also asked whether they were promoting Marxist theory by pushing critical race theory in their advertising and in what their agenda. And again, they couldn't answer that clearly. They seemed to think that there was nothing wrong with pushing Marxist ideology when you're a government body in Australia.
Yeah, look, that's right. I mean, ultimately, this does come back to the concept of critical race theory, which is something I think Senator Canavan touched on during the day. And look, that question was put, and I think the answer was basically, look, we don't really know, that's not really the idea, we're not really doing that. But the language is very similar. I mean, the language used in that tender appears to come straight from the critical race theory handbook, which is, that there is a contest between the oppressor and the oppressed. Well, why the taxpayer is paying for this is anyone's guess. I don't know. And presumably Senator Canavan will get to the bottom of that as well with his further questioning.
Senator Alex Antic from South Australia, do a fantastic job there. And as Matt Canavan and Claire Chandler and others, terrific to see you actually raising those questions. As Rita said, next stop, Prime Minister, please do something about it. Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders, Alex Antic.
Thanks, guys.